I spent 9 years building their empire, securing a $290 million contract they couldn't manage without me. When the CEO's daughter fired me to modernize the department, she didn't read the fine print. One specific clause triggered a legal landslide that cost them everything. This is where the corporate ladder collapsed under its own weight, and trust me, you won't want to miss the fallout. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Have you ever been asked to train the person replacing you? Let us know in the comments. It was 4:52 p.m. on a Thursday, and my body was vibrating with a level of exhaustion that felt less like fatigue and more like a systemic failure. I was holding a travel mug filled with breakroom coffee that tasted like burnt battery acid, staring at a spreadsheet that contained more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. My head was pounding, a sharp, rhythmic throb behind my left eye that had started on Tuesday and decided to move in permanently. I had just spent the last 6 hours navigating a regulatory minefield for the Lander and Holt Energy account, unraveling a vendor discrepancy that threatened to shut down a tri-state power grid investment. I wasn't just tired, I was physically fragile. I had skipped lunch again. I had missed my own dentist appointment again. My hands were shaking slightly, not from caffeine, but from the adrenaline crash of averting yet another crisis. I was the person who kept the chaos from tipping into catastrophe. I was the duct tape holding this company together, specifically our crown jewel, the $290 million Lander and Holt account. It was a beast of a client. Interstate power grid investments, federal oversight, EPA clauses, Department of Energy compliance. It was a monster, and I made it run like a microwave clock. I was just allowing myself a moment of quiet pride, a rare, fleeting sensation, because the client had sent a personal thank you email directly to me 10 minutes prior. A real, honest-to-God, thank you, Julie, for saving us. I was glowing from it. Then my calendar pinged. The sound was sharp in the quiet office. I glanced at the notification sliding onto my screen. Meeting, 5:00 p.m. location, HR Room 4B sender, restricted subject, none. In that moment, the glow evaporated. My whole body went cold, a sudden, icy drop in temperature that started in my stomach and seized my lungs. See, when you work long enough in corporate America, your instincts sharpen into something primal. You can smell layoffs like a herd animal smells a thunderstorm. You know the rhythm of bad news. It doesn't come at 9:00 a.m. on a Monday. It comes at 4:52 p.m. on a Thursday, just late enough to avoid a scene, just early enough to clear the desk. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a compliance check. Maybe it was a surprise bonus for the miracle I just pulled off with the invoices. But my hands, still hovering over the keyboard, went numb. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, distinct from the migraine. This wasn't just nerves. This was a premonition. I grabbed my folder, the heavy, leather-bound one I always carried for client-facing meetings, just in case. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy and uncooperative, and walked down the beige hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a sound I usually ignored but now sounded like a warning siren. I walked past the empty cubicles, past the motivational posters about teamwork and synergy, feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. I stopped at the door to room 4B. The frosted glass hid the occupants, but I could see the silhouettes. 2 of them. I took a breath that rattled in my chest, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. I didn't know it yet, but the woman who stepped into room 4B wasn't coming back out. The betrayal I was about to face was worse than the diagnosis of irrelevance itself. Madison was already seated at the head of the small, airless conference table when I walked in. She looked like a queen awaiting tribute, or perhaps a cat that had just cornered a particularly slow mouse. Madison Rhee, the CEO's daughter, the recently self-declared EVP of Strategy. She was 26 years old, wearing a blazer that cost more than my first car, draped over her shoulders like a cape. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving with a rhythmic, dismissive flick. Beside her sat Carla, our HR manager. Poor Carla. She looked like someone trapped between a live grenade and a toddler holding a lit match. Her eyes were fixed on a stack of papers in front of her, refusing to meet mine. That was the second confirmation. HR representatives only look at the table when they are ashamed of what they are about to do. "Julie," Madison said, her voice breathy and laced with a faux authority that made my teeth ache. She didn't look up from her screen. "Thanks for coming on such short notice." I said nothing. Ust pulled out a chair and sat down. You learn, after years of being the adult in every room, that silence can be a scalpel. Let them talk. Let them fill the void. Let them make the first incision. Madison finally set her phone down, face up. She cleared her throat and laced her fingers together on the table, posing as if she were being photographed for a Women in Business magazine spread. "So," she began, tilting her head with a practiced, sympathetic pout, "this isn't easy." I waited. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but my face remained stone. "After a careful review of departmental synergies and strategic redundancy," Madison said, glancing at Carla as if seeking approval for using big words, "we've decided your role is no longer aligned with our forward-facing initiatives." Translation: you're done. Get out before I chip a nail on your legacy. I looked at Carla. Her eyes darted away, focusing intently on a stain on the carpet. HR, the corporate guilt sponge. Madison continued, chirpy as a robotic vacuum cleaner trapped in a closet. "We appreciate everything you've done, Julie, really. But we're streamlining account oversight to create a more agile structure. We need fresh eyes, modern energy." I didn't blink. "You're firing me." The words hung in the air, stripping away the varnish of her corporate speak. A pause stretched out, long enough to let her discomfort crack the conditioned air of the room. "It's not about you, per se," Madison said, smiling that terrifying smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile that suggested she had just invented empathy and was waiting for a patent. "We'll be handling the clients ourselves now. The strategy team is going to absorb your duties." And there it was, the moment, the knife dressed as progress. "The strategy team," I repeated, my voice flat. "You mean, you." "Myself and the team, yes," Madison beamed, mistaking my clarification for acceptance. "We think we can optimize the process, automate the hands-on communication, bring it into the 21st century. I felt a strange sensation then. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was the cold, hard click of a lock snapping into place. Carla slid a manila envelope across the table. It moved with a dry hiss against the laminate. "Severance package," Carla whispered, her voice barely audible. "NDA clause is bolded. Standard separation terms." "Do you have any questions?" Madison asked, already reaching for her phone again, her attention span expiring. "We're giving you until the end of the day to pack up. Security will escort you at 6. The clock on the wall ticked. 5:07 p.m. I stared at Madison. I looked at her perfectly highlighted hair, her manicured nails, the absolute, breathtaking arrogance of her ignorance. She saw a middle-aged woman in a gray suit, a relic to be discarded. She saw a budget line item she could delete to fund her visioning workshops. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. It was a small thing, really. A detail buried deep in the bedrock of the company's operations. A detail that lived in a PDF file on a secure server, time-stamped and binding. I opened the envelope, scanned the first page, and then I laughed. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't bitter. It was a quiet, almost amused puff of breath. The kind of laugh you make when someone throws a match into a puddle they think is water, but you know is gasoline. "No questions," I said softly. I stood up, smoothed the front of my blazer, and slid the envelope back across the table like a receipt for a meal I had refused to eat. Madison blinked, finally looking up, confused by my lack of begging. She wanted a scene. She wanted tears. She wanted me to ask why, so she could feel powerful denying me an answer. "I'm leaving the severance," I said. "I won't be needing it." I turned and walked out. I could feel Madison's eyes boring into my back, confused, perhaps slightly unnerved by the lack of drama. But she didn't know that the drama wasn't happening in this room. It was waiting for her in a clause she had never bothered to read. To understand why this moment was so catastrophic for them, you have to understand what I gave up to get here. For 9 years, I didn't just work for this company. I lived for it. I was the one who answered the phone at 3:00 a.m. on Christmas morning when a transformer blew in Ohio and the client needed immediate PR mitigation. I was the one who missed my niece's graduation because the EPA decided to audit our filing status 2 days before a deadline. I was the one who sat in hospital waiting rooms with a laptop balanced on my knees, drafting compliance amendments while my mother underwent surgery, just so the Lander and Holt deal wouldn't stall. I wasn't flashy. I didn't need my name on plaques or fancy LinkedIn buzzwords. I didn't need applause. I just wanted my work respected. I wanted the security of knowing that my competence was my currency. But then came Madison. Madison Rhee was the embodiment of everything wrong with modern corporate nepotism. She had floated into the executive wing 6 months ago, fresh from a sabbatical in Bali, and was immediately handed the title of Executive Vice President of Strategy. Her qualifications? She was Grant Rhee's only daughter, and he couldn't say no to her over Sunday brunch. Before Madison, the office had a rhythm. It was high stress, yes, but it was a logical stress. Then she arrived like a perfume ad with no scent, pretty, overhyped, and absolutely useless. She started floating around the executive floor, interrupting high-level operational meetings with ideas like, what if we rebrand the compliance team as the Client Happiness Unit? I wish I were kidding. The first time she tried to muscle in on my Lander and Holt account, she asked Neen Carson, the client's general counsel, a woman who eats federal regulators for breakfast, if the power plants came with free car washes for the staff. I remember the silence on that conference call. It was absolute. Neen had paused, blinked slowly on the video feed, and asked to be rescheduled. I spent 3 days smoothing that over, framing Madison's idiocy as creative brainstorming. I survived 5 leadership changes, 1 merger, 2 budget freezes, and 1 CFO who tried to hit on me using Excel metaphors. I wasn't scared of corporate sharks. But Madison? She had that dangerous blend of total ignorance and absolute power that always precedes a disaster. She didn't know what she didn't know, and she had the authority to fire anyone who tried to tell her. She had been circling my desk for weeks, sipping her matcha and wearing blazers like costumes. I think we can optimize this process, she would chirp, tapping my contract tracker like it offended her aesthetic. You do a lot of hands-on communication, Julie, but have you considered automating that? With what? I had asked her once. A Google form. She had beamed at me. Exactly. Why does a human need to send these reports? Somewhere deep in the bowels of our client's operations hub, a nuclear compliance officer probably felt a disturbance in the force. But I had just nodded, taken my notes, and smiled like she had invented gravity. Because that's what you do when someone with a famous last name is determined to step over your body to climb the ladder. She resented me. I saw it in the way she looked at me during staff meetings, bored, dismissive, annoyed that I was the one people turned to for answers while she was the one with the title. She wanted to be the hero, but she didn't want to do the work. She wanted the $290 million account on her resume, but she didn't want to deal with the boring parts like compliance, legal continuity, or specialized operational knowledge. So she decided to remove the obstacle. She decided to streamline me out of existence. She sat there in room 4B, checking her Instagram likes, thinking she had just trimmed some fat from the budget. She thought she was a genius strategist. She thought she had one. She had no idea that she had just pulled the pin on a grenade that I had been holding for 6 months. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table or deliver a dramatic monologue about my years of service. That's what they expect. They expect you to implode, to give them a reason to call security, to validate their decision by proving you're emotional or unstable. They want your fury because it makes them feel like the rational ones. I wasn't going to give Madison that satisfaction. Instead, I stood up and walked out of room 4B. The hallway seemed longer than it had 10 minutes ago, the beige walls closing in like the sides of a coffin. I walked to my desk, my corner desk. Thank you very much. The one with the view of the skyline I'd earned through missed birthdays, late nights, weekend conference calls, and more client resuscitations than I could count. My nameplate, Julie Rayner, Director of Strategic Accounts, still shone under the fluorescent lights. I had polished it just last week after the quarterly report. I stared at it for a second, feeling a surreal detachment, as if I were looking at an artifact in a museum exhibit about a civilization that had just collapsed. I sat down and logged in one last time. My hands were steady. I didn't delete files. I didn't send angry farewell emails to the staff. I didn't format the hard drive. That's amateur hour. That's liability. I opened one specific folder, Client Contracts, Active Renewals. I checked the timestamp, clearly labeled, clearly untouched. I closed the rest of the windows. Then I took a small, encrypted flash drive out of my purse, my personal backup for working from home, and slid it into the port. I copied exactly one file, not for revenge, for protocol, for my own records. Because when you deal with federal compliance, if it isn't saved in 3 places, it doesn't exist. Hut down the computer. The screen went black, capturing my reflection, pale, tired, but eyes sharp. I took the framed photo of my mother from the desk. She was smiling, wearing her Sunday best. She always used to tell me, "Don't let pretty shoes take your dignity, baby." I tucked the frame into my leather tote. I left the company pens. I left the branded mug. I left the stapler I had bought with my own money. I left it all. On my way out, I passed Madison in the hallway. She was leaning against the wall, laughing with someone from finance, a guy named Greg who wore too much cologne. She didn't even notice me. She was too busy basking in the afterglow of her power move. She looked radiant, unburdened, completely unaware that she was standing on a trapdoor she had just unlatched herself. Perfect, because what came next, she would never see coming. Outside, the sky was the color of old nickel, heavy, electric, bruising purple at the edges. The air felt thick, the way it does the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I stood on the sidewalk for a second longer than I needed to, breathing in the smell of exhaust and ozone. Then I walked to my car, silent and smiling. Not because I was okay. I was. My stomach was in knots, and the humiliation was a hot coal in my chest. But I smiled because I knew one thing she didn't. That contract was still active, and she had just walked into a legal buzzsaw in designer heels. By the time I got home, I had peeled off my blazer and the betrayal both. My dog, a golden retriever mix named Barnaby, didn't even look up from the couch when I walked in, which felt weirdly fitting. 8 years of loyalty to that company, and suddenly I was just another scent fading from the furniture. I dropped my tote on the granite kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of Cabernet. I didn't drink it immediately. It wasn't a celebration. Not yet. It was a ritual. The first step in reclaiming my evening from the mouth of chaos. Then, I sat at my kitchen island and opened my personal laptop. See, I'm not the kind of woman who goes quietly. I'm the kind of woman who reads contracts. All the contracts. The kind who remembers every dotted line, every conditional clause, every forgotten amendment filed on a random Tuesday after a client meltdown. The kind who doesn't just shake hands, I write the memo after. And 6 months ago, after a multi-agency compliance audit nearly nuked the Lander and Holt account, I had pushed through a renewal clause. It wasn't ego, it was survival. Neen Carson, the client's general counsel, had specifically requested it. She had looked me in the eye during a Zoom call, her face grim, and said, "Julie, I can't teach a new liaison the difference between a FERC filing and a hole in the ground. We can't afford another shuffle. Put it in writing." So we did. I navigated through my files until I found it. Amendment 9, C tied to Contract 3B290. I opened the PDF. It scrolled smoothly down the screen. Executed, time-stamped, signed, still active, still binding. And absolutely, unequivocally violated the moment Madison chirped, "We'll handle the clients ourselves." I leaned back, the blue light of the screen illuminating my kitchen. I wasn't just a fired employee anymore. I was a strategist holding the blueprints to the building they had just kicked me out of, and I knew exactly which load-bearing wall they had just taken a sledgehammer to. I didn't forward the document out of spite. I forwarded it because it was my job, even if they had just told me I didn't have one anymore. I opened Outlook on my personal machine. I drafted the message. I kept it short, clinical, no adjectives, no flair, no emotional outbursts. This wasn't a diary entry, it was a detonation cord. Subject, Continuity Clause Flaglander and Holt Contract 3B290. Body, per the attached executed amendment dated April 4th, I am formally flagging a potential compliance breach related to service continuity for Lander and Holt Energy. Please confirm receipt of the attached documents. Attached, Executed Contract 3B290, PDF, Amendment 9C Service Liaison Continuity, PDF. I added the recipients. To Neen Carson, General Counsel, Lander and Holt Energy. CC, Internal Legal Counsel, my former company, External Compliance Audit Team, BCC, none. I wanted everyone to see exactly who was on this chain. I hovered over the send button. My heart was beating like a steady drum, slow, heavy, powerful. This wasn't revenge. This was documentation. My language, my blade. I click send. I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds afterward. The wine remained untouched. The house was silent. But I knew that thousands of miles away, on a secure server, a notification had just landed in an inbox that was monitored by people who didn't find typos funny. I opened the document again, just to be sure. I needed to see it. I needed to trace the lines of their destruction. There it was in bold, Section 14C, in the even. T that the assigned liaison, Miss Julie M. Rayner, is terminated, transitioned, or removed from active participation in the project without written consent from Lander and Holt Energy. Said removal shall be considered a material breach of contract and grounds for immediate reevaluation of terms up to and including termination with cause. Simple, unmistakable. And right at the bottom, signed in blue ink, Madison L. Rhee, EVP Strategy. Oh, Maddie, you sweet, clueless peacock. I closed the file. I knew how these things moved. Glacial at first, then avalanche. I scheduled a backup email to send at 7:45 a.m. the next morning. Same document, different audience. The CFO, the VP of Client Services, and my former manager, people who actually understood that compliance wasn't just a suggestion. I shut the laptop. Finally, I drank my wine. I let the dog out into the yard. I took the trash to the curb like it was any other Thursday, but something in the air had shifted. You ever feel it? That faint electric ripple that hums through your bones when a massive structure begins to buckle. It wasn't fear anymore, it was clarity. Madison thought she had pulled off a power move, firing the gray-suited relic in the corner office. She thought she could reinvent a system she hadn't even bothered to learn. But what she really did was amputate a limb she didn't know was keeping the body alive. And now the nerves were about to scream. I didn't sleep well that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the look on Madison's face, the pity in Carla's eyes. But mostly, I thought about the clock. I knew exactly what time the building's HVAC system kicked on, 7:58 a.m., and I knew that by 8:17 a.m., the first email checks of the day would begin. The next morning, I woke up with the sun. I made coffee, good coffee, not the break room sludge, and sat on my patio. At 8:17 a.m., I imagined the scene. I couldn't see it, but I knew the players well enough to script it. Grant Rhee, the CEO, gray temples, cufflinks stamped with his initials. A man who once shook hands with a U.S. senator and wiped his palm on his slacks afterward. He would be opening his inbox. He would see a subject line no C-suite executive ever wants to see before their second espresso. Service termination risk flag. He would click it, he would read it, he would stop, he would read it again. Neen Carson didn't write polite emails. She wrote legal mandates. I knew exactly what she would say because I knew how she thought. She wouldn't ask why I was fired. She would ask why the contract was violated. This correspondence is to confirm we've received documentation suggesting a breach of our service continuity agreement. Termination of Miss Julie M. Rayner without prior client consultation may constitute a violation of Clause 14C. Please advise. Please advise, 2 words that in the legal world mean, start praying. I took a sip of my coffee. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful morning. I imagined Grant walking out of his office. I imagined the slow, measured steps across the executive suite. I imagined him stopping at Madison's door. Tell me you didn't terminate her active contract. I could almost hear Madison's confusion. What? I didn't know it was active. Nobody told me about Clause 14. Clause 14C, Grant would say, his voice low and tight, was added after you authorized the amendment. You signed it, April 4th. No one flagged it, she would insist. Julie didn't need to flag it, Grant would snap. Julie wrote it. I closed my eyes and let the warmth of the sun soak into my face. The first domino had fallen. There were 8 more lined up behind it. By 10:00 a.m., my phone, which had been blissfully silent, began to vibrate on the patio table. I didn't answer. I just watched the names flash on the screen. First, it was a junior analyst from client services. Then, a project manager I had mentored. Then, finally, the main event. Incoming call, Madison Rhee. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 5 minutes later, she called again. I picked up the phone, not to answer, but to check the transcription of the voicemail she had just left. Hi, Julie. Hey, it's Madison. Just wanted to check in. See how you're doing. We're working through a few little hiccups here with the transition, and I think it'd be so helpful to maybe reconnect, for continuity. No pressure. Just give me a ring when you can. Hiccups, she called them. A breach of a $290 million contract is not a hiccup, Madison. It's cardiac arrest. I didn't call back. Instead, I got dressed. Not in a suit, but in smart casual, jeans, a silk blouse, a blazer that looked professional but relaxed. I had a meeting. I drove downtown to Rayner's Cafe, no relation, just a happy coincidence. Sitting at a sunlit table in the back was Dana Lai. Dana was a senior partner at Preston Marks Consulting. She was one of the few people in the city with the clearance and bandwidth to handle multi-million-dollar energy accounts with federal touchpoints. She was sharp, expensive, and terrifyingly competent. She was also Neen, Carson's old law school roommate. Dana smiled over her glasses as I sat down. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered a portfolio. So, she said, tapping her pen against the table. Let me guess. They terminated you mid-contract without client sign-off, breached a continuity clause, and now they're bleeding accounts like a stuck pig. I ordered a cortado, something like that. Dana chuckled, a low, throaty sound. Julie, I've seen bad strategy, I've seen stupid strategy. But this is gourmet. It's not my mess anymore, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Want it to be? Dana tilted her head. Neen called me an hour ago. She's livid. She says she's locked out of their procurement portal. I paused, the cup halfway to my mouth. Locked out. Revoked admin access, Dana confirmed. Apparently, your former IT department panicked when the breach flag went up and froze everything to preserve data. They locked the client out of their own project dashboard. I closed my eyes and exhaled. That was Cheryl, the CFO. She would have ordered a total lockdown to prevent data exfiltration. not realizing that locking out a client like Lander and Holt is an act of war. "They're digging the hole deeper," I murmured. "They're not digging," Dana corrected. "They're mining for bottom. Neen wants to move the account. Today, she asked if I knew anyone who understood the compliance history, the audit trails, the EPA filing codes." She slid a document across the table. It wasn't a job offer, it was a partnership agreement. J.R. Stratline Advisory, LLC. "I took the liberty of checking the name availability," Dana said. "Preston Marks can handle the back-end, billing, legal, overhead. You handle the client. You are the consultancy. Independent contractor. Billings go through us, you take 80%. I looked at the paper. It was freedom. It was my name, my work, without the politics, without the Madisons. "Neen is waiting for the green light," Dana said softly. "She's ready to terminate the contract with your old firm for cause, but she needs a landing zone." I picked up a pen. Let's build one. Meanwhile, back at the office, the hiccups were turning into convulsions. My phone buzzed again, another voicemail from Madison. I played this one on speaker so Dana could hear. "Julie, we need to talk. Seriously, there's been some confusion. The board might be involved soon, and I think it would look really good for you, for everyone, really, if we were seen as collaborative. Please call me. We can discuss adjustments to your severance." Dana laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. "Adjustments to your severance? She thinks she can buy you off with an extra 2 weeks of pay." "She doesn't realize the currency has changed," I said. "She's trying to negotiate with monopoly money." But it wasn't just Madison spiraling. The rot was spreading. While I was signing the partnership papers with Dana, a second notification popped up on my phone. It was an automated alert from a different client, a renewable energy tech vendor out of Phoenix. A smaller account, maybe $15 million, but strategic. Subject, account freeze/clarification request. I read the preview. "In light of recent staffing changes and lack of formal communication, we are placing all Q4 initiatives on temporary hold until we can verify alignment with original personnel agreements." I showed the screen to Dana. "The ripple effect," she noted. "They talk, clients talk, especially in highly regulated industries. If Lander and Holt is wobbling, everyone else gets nervous." "Cheryl is going to have a stroke," I said, almost feeling bad for the CFO. Almost. "Cheryl should have read the contract," Dana replied ruthlessly. By 2:00 p.m., the silence from my end was doing more damage than any lawsuit could. The fact that I wasn't answering, wasn't bargaining, and wasn't returning to the building to help out was creating a vacuum. And in that vacuum, panic was expanding. I could imagine the conference room right now. Grant pacing. Madison trying to spin this as a learning opportunity. Legal tearing through archives looking for a loophole that didn't exist. They were looking for a plan B, but there was no plan B, there was no alternate liaison filed. There was no transition memo. There was just a crater where I used to stand. Dana packed up her papers. "I'm sending the proposal to Neen now. Stratline Advisory is officially open for business." "Do it," I said. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I checked my phone, 3:15 p.m. "I'm going to go home," I said. "I have a dog to walk, and I think I'm going to finally enjoy that glass of wine." I walked out of the cafe into the afternoon sun. I felt lighter than I had in a decade. The anchor was gone. The P was sinking, and I was already on the shore, building a fortress. The alert hit the executive team like a silent siren. No chime, no announcement, just a new meeting stamped in red on everyone's calendars. Board special session. Status, closed door. Time, 6:00 p.m. Attendees. CEO, CFO, GC, board members only. Note, no delegates. No delegates meant no Madison. By 5:45 p.m., the executive floor was practically humming with that specific frequency of dread that precedes a corporate execution. Phones buzzed in hands but weren't answered. People moved quickly through the corridors. eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding contact. The janitor vacuuming outside the elevator paused to listen, not because he was nosy, but because the entire building had gone suddenly, violently quiet. Inside Conference Room 1A, the lights were dim. The air was sharp with the smell of whiteboard markers and tension sweat. The long mahogany table was lined with bottled waters that no one touched. Cheryl, the CFO, sat near the screen, iPad in hand, her face drawn and pale, like she'd been awake for 3 days. When Grant walked in, he didn't sit at the head of the table. He sat 2 chairs down. That simple shift in geometry said more than any preamble could. "Let's begin," the chairman said. He was a man of few words and even fewer sympathies. Cheryl stood up. She didn't bother with the usual good evening or thanks for coming. She just swiped her tablet. "Here's where we are," she said, her voice clipped and cold. "If Lander and Holt withdraws, our Q4 collapses. Not dips, not takes a hit. Collapses. That account props up 3 satellite contracts, 2 joint ventures, and our entire DECA compliance baseline. If we are flagged for breach, our vendor rating drops to subprime, and the federal pipeline dries up instantly." She swiped the screen. Slide 1, projected revenue loss, $61.2 million. Slide 2, contingency impact, loss of secondary accounts tied to audit trail. Slide 3, recovery timeline, 18-22 months, assuming federal reintegration. The silence that followed wasn't dead. It was undead. It crawled up the walls, slithered into the air vents, lived in every throat. Then, the general counsel cleared her throat. She opened a paper folder so precisely you'd think she was performing surgery. "I'd like to read Clause 14C into the record," she said. No one stopped her. "In the event that the assigned liaison, Miss Julie M. Rayner, is terminated, transitioned, or removed from active participation in the project without written consent from Lander and Holt Energy, said removal shall be considered a material breach of contract." She paused, flipping a page. Amendment 9C, executed April 4th. Signed by EVP Strategy, Madison Rhee. Effective for a period of 12 months with auto-renewal unless explicitly revoked in writing with 30 days' notice. She looked up over her reading glasses. No such notice was filed. Someone at the end of the table exhaled hard enough to fog the glass. "So," the chairman said slowly, his voice like grinding stones. "Not only did she fire our key liaison mid-contract without client approval, she also violated an auto-renewed clause and didn't follow any notice period protocol." "That is correct," the GC nodded. "And no secondary was ever submitted," Cheryl added. "No backup, no shadow onboarding, it was a dead-air handoff." Another board member looked over their glasses. This was the CEO's daughter. Grant's jaw flexed, he stared straight ahead. "Yes." The room fell into that particular kind of silence. Not awkward, not confused, radioactive. "And you signed off on her promotion into that role," the chairman continued, relentless. "I did," Grant said. His voice was gravel. "Against committee recommendation." A pause. "Yes." "And oversight protocols." Grant closed his eyes for a brief second. "Yes." The GC folded her hands. "Then you are also responsible for this breach, Mr. Rhee, legally and operationally." That statement landed like a brick through a plate glass window. Cheryl broke the silence with one last, awful note. "We've just received word. Lander and Holt's procurement portal has revoked our admin access. We are locked out." No one swore. No one threw anything. But the chairman closed his folder with a soft, devastating finality. "We will draft a formal response," he said. "No more communications from your daughter, no outreach, no rebuttals. From this moment forward, all contact goes through legal." Then his eyes landed on Grant. "And Mr. Rhee, the board will be holding a separate review session regarding leadership continuity. Your presence will be requested, not required." Translation: start cleaning out your office. Grant didn't flinch. He couldn't. He just sat there, bones turned to stone, heart ticking like a bomb someone else set, but he had handed them the code. Outside the room, the hallway buzzed with questions no one was brave enough to ask. Inside, the CEO Fina. Ellie saw it, not the claws, not the freeze, not the projections. He saw Julie. He saw what she had built, what he had let be taken, what couldn't be replaced by bloodline or buzzwords. And somewhere, probably sipping tea by now, he realized Julie already knew they weren't calling her back. They were circling the wreckage she left behind. The reply came at 7:12 a.m. Friday morning. No subject line, just a short preview that popped up across 6 executive inboxes at once. We will now be working through Miss Julie M. Rayners. Cheryl saw it first. She didn't open it right away. She just stared at her screen for a full 10 seconds, her index finger hovering over the mouse like she was touching a live wire. Then she clicked. The message was barely a sentence long. No warm-up, no pleasantries, no fluff. From Neen Carson, GC Lander and Holt Energy to Legal, Grant Rhee, Cheryl V. We will now be working through Miss Julie M. Rayners' independent consultancy. She understands our needs. All future correspondence regarding contract 3B290 compliance should be directed to her firm to facilitate the transition of assets. No threats, no lawsuit language, no official breach declaration, just a decision. By 7:16 a.m., Legal had confirmed the sender. By 7:18 a.m., the Lander and Holt procurement portal listed a new vendor code. Vendor, J.R. Stratline Advisory LLC. Primary liaison, Julie M. Rayner. The reaction wasn't loud. There was no scream, no table flip. It was quieter than that. An analyst in business ops stopped typing and just stared. Someone in facilities dropped their coffee. The guy from IT who always played pop punk through his speakers actually paused his music. And in the boardroom, where a few brave souls had gathered early, waiting for a miracle, there was only silence. Then Cheryl read the email aloud, once, then again. The second time, no one moved. Grant sat there, mouth slightly open, like he was still trying to decide whether it was real or some bureaucratic fever dream. Madison was already standing. She didn't wait for the rest of it, didn't ask for context, didn't demand a spin cycle. She just threw her folder across the table with a snap. You all wanted her gone, she hissed, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and entitlement. No, said Cheryl, cool as ice. You wanted her gone, we tolerated you. Madison spun toward Legal. Are you seriously letting this happen? The general counsel just held up the contract packet, tapping the corner of the page that bore Madison's signature. You happened, that was it. Madison stood frozen for half a breath. Then she grabbed her phone, muttered something that sounded like "I'm done," and stormed out of the room. Her heels clacked like a metronome, counting down to impact. No one followed her. No one spoke. For a few long moments, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of the projector fan and the faint vibration of Grant's phone as it buzzed again and again. Press inquiries, shareholders, maybe even his wife. Cheryl finally broke the silence. Well, she said, leaning back in her chair, at least we know who understands the business. Legal nodded, and who doesn't? No one dared ask if they could get her back, because they already knew. Julie wasn't coming back, not to them. She didn't need to. They hadn't just lost a liaison. They hadn't just lost an account. They'd lost the person who kept the lights on when the wiring was already fried. And she'd built her own damn generator. By 9:03 a.m., my LinkedIn quietly updated. Principal consultant at J.R. Stratline Advisory, specializing in high-risk account recovery and strategic continuity. No photo change. No, I'm humbled to start this journey post. Just the facts, because I didn't need applause, I had proof. The boardroom emptied slowly, like a funeral procession without the sobbing. One by one they filed out, shoulders hunched, ties loosened, jaws tight, no post-meeting chatter, no circle back. Just the quiet, unanimous retreat of people who knew the damage was done. Grant Rhee remained in his chair. The room had gone dim as the sun lowered through the slats of the blinds, casting angled lines across the table like prison bars. In front of him, printed in black ink on clean white paper, lay a copy of Amendment 9C Clause 14C. Termination of designated liaison without client approval shall be deemed breach. Below it, one signature, Madison L. Rhee. He stared at the page like it might apologize, like if he looked hard enough, the ink would smudge or the clause would vanish. But it didn't. It was right there, irrevocable. They devoted, not just on Julie, on him. The motion had passed with no debate. Julie wouldn't be rehired. She wouldn't be offered a walk-back deal. That door had closed, but her company, that was different. Preston Marks had already confirmed the subcontractor approval. Cheryl had handled the purchase order. The retainer was already in motion. My firm would be paid, not out of pride, not out of grace, but because there was no other option. The company needed me, and I didn't need them. Grant picked up the contract, held it by the edge, then let it fall gently back to the table. It made a sound that was far too soft for how loud the truth had landed. Julie had never raised her voice, never made a scene, never marched through the halls with a cardboard box and a bitter monologue. She didn't rage. She didn't flinch. She'd simply walked away, documents in place, contracts intact. A single email BCC'd to the right person at the right time. She hadn't needed revenge, just gravity. Grant leaned back in his chair, stared at the ceiling. Somewhere down the hallway, Madison's office door clicked shut for the last time. And finally, he said it, not loudly, not to anyone in particular, just to the quiet. She didn't burn the bridge. He looked down again at my name. She owned it. Across town, in an office that still smelled like new carpet and quiet ambition, I sat at my desk. The sunlight was warm on my shoulders. My phone was silent. My inbox was clean. There was no celebration, no champagne, no "I told you so," just the soft, steady hum of control. My name was on the paperwork, my rates were locked, my firm was active. And I wasn't angry, I wasn't even smiling. I was still and absolutely unshaken. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.